Remark. Representative Ziobron of the 34th District. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. Mr. Speaker, I am standing here today representing my colleagues on this side of the aisle to say a few words about our budget. Like my friend from New Haven, we also share in the gratitude of the folks that you have thanked earlier, especially our nonpartisan staff and Neil Ayers specifically. In addition, I would be remiss because I didn't have a chance to thank the partisan staff when we were here just a few short weeks ago. So I want to make sure I do that now, because the staff on our side of the aisle, to put it into perspective, have developed 10 budgets. 10 budgets since the beginning of the year. So I need to thank not only Jared Schmidt, who is the House Republican budget staff, but also Lisa Hammersley in the Senate office, and of course, our leaders on both sides of the aisle for navigating waters that frankly were historic and had never been done before over the last month and a half. While there have been some people who have rightfully been frustrated with not being able to see budget documents over the last couple of days, what's kind of amazing from our side of the aisle is our ideas, our concepts, our proposals have been publicly available for months. And while this document is certainly a compromise, what I've been trying to remind the people that have been contacting me is, what's amazing about this is that the minority party has been engaged, has developed those kinds of proposals in a historic way. And even though our budget that contained 100% of our reforms didn't garner enough support for a veto override, we didn't give up on Connecticut. This side of the aisle could have at that point sat down, crossed our arms, said, we gave you our best ideas, now it's your problem. And frankly, some of our more rabid partisan supporters, probably on both sides of the aisle, would like to see us stay in that mode. But that's not what governance is about. So I'm proud of the fact that this document, while it doesn't have 100%, I would say to you and to those people who are out in the state wondering what Republicans accomplished in the minority, we accomplished 85% of our policy goals, and the respect and earned respect as this process continues, because like my good friend mentioned, this is the first step in a very long road. It's the first step, Mr. Speaker, because as you know, by the end of next month, we'll have updated revenue consensus numbers. I know, I hate to remind you of that, sir. And I fear we're going to be right back to having some very hard choices in several months. But we are not giving up on Connecticut. We are ready on this side of the aisle to continue this new historic process and govern a document together through the next session. And I think that's important to understand. There are a lot of structural spending reforms in this document. You're going to hear more about them from the ranking member of the Revenue and Finance Committee. But not only did we provide spending reforms, we also prioritized spending, and we listened to our Democrat colleagues after we brought out the first historic budget vote of this chamber. And you see that reflected in this document. But we also made sure our priorities, our spending priorities were met. We made sure to fund an additional $2 million for our seniors, for Meals on Wheels and senior centers across this state. We made sure to fund a program called Care for Kids, because the principles on this side of the aisle is a hand up, not a handout, a hand up. And the Care for Kids program provides an opportunity for working parents to stay working, to provide for their families, and provide to be the role models to break the cycle. We reopen both priority groups in Care for Kids. DMIS and DDS. One of the longest conversations we've had over the last few weeks is whether we agreed with the governor's holdbacks and rescissions for these agencies that provide the critical safety net for this state. We refused to cut those funds. We had policy conversations about it for the first time in a very deliberative way. And so we restored that funding in most areas with the exception of one. Leaders from both sides of the aisle worked on a new ECS formula, and to their credit, they looked at least a dozen formulas over the last several weeks and came to a decision with Republican input that changes drastically the horrible governor's executive order to our communities to make sure that if there's going to be reductions, it's sustainable and, most importantly, predictable for our school districts. And we did that together, Mr. Speaker. We provide full funding to our pensions, full funding to our pensions as required by actuaries of this state. We provide funding for Connecticut home care for the elderly, additional funding for firefighter training schools, and we listened to the hospital and those business owners and another safety net of this state when they said, we support this negotiated deal, and we inserted the hospital tax, which was not in our original proposal. While some claim that this does nothing to help the state, and I would agree, it certainly doesn't put us to balance in the out years. The spending reforms in this document are going to help pave the way for the future, and I hope, I really sincerely hope, ensure that the minority party in this building has a seat at that table in good faith and in partnership to take the R off and put the C on our lapels and work together for the betterment of this state we all love. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Madam.